Welcome to Ask Dan and Britni Anything. This version of Ask Anything focuses on federal government contracting with Dan Eisen. Dan is an industrial organizational psychologist with a specialty in organizational development. He applies behavioral science to workplace issues at the individual and organizational level in commercial and government environments. Currently, he is a contractor working in the State Department in Washington, D.C. Dan has extensive experience in large-scale transformation initiatives, business process analysis and design, qualitative survey design and analysis, group facilitation, developing criteria to evaluate the performance of individuals and organizations, and identifying learning and development needs. He is also an adjunct with George Mason University, teaching intro to government contracting. So Dan, as we were talking before everyone jumped on today, you mentioned that this is by far the most interesting part of your year. So I would like to ask you right now, what is a typical day like? What's making it so interesting?
Oh, it's crazy. First, Brittany, thank you for inviting me. And hi, everyone. Thanks for taking your time. I know it's been a long day for everybody. So like Brittany said, I'm a contractor with the State Department. I support the Bureau of Consular Affairs. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the State Department, but it's broken up into multiple organizations called bureaus. Each one has its own unique operations, and each one of them provide their different services. So Consular Affairs, about 60% of the organization are all of the folks who provide domestic passport operations. I don't have anything really to do with that. The other part of the Bureau are all of the diplomats, foreign service officers who live and work overseas for the most part and issue visas to either students, business people, tourism. They also provide overseas citizen services for American citizens who may be jailed or maybe have to be evacuated. So when you see things like the Afghanistan evacuations, a lot of my consular officers will come in to act as secondary responders and also provide support, making sure that every American citizen is taken care of and has a safe passage back to the United States or wherever they need to be. And they do quite a lot more work than that, but these are people who live and work overseas and in embassies all around the world. But they can't stay, part of their career path is they can't stay in that country for more than a year or two or even three. They also need to come back to the US and do some domestic tours because they need to learn how Washington works. And so what happens is they bid on their onward assignments. Unlike the military, where you're told where you're going, in the Foreign Service, you get to basically reapply and do a reapply for a new job every year or two or three. It's kind of one of the hardest things that they have to do because it's very difficult. It's very competitive. It is a part of their career path. It's a part of getting promoted. And part of the bid process, which really happens for the most part, the main bid cycle happens in the summer, is that they have to create a lobbying package. And that is everything about them from a resume to all the work that they've done to 360 evaluations. And that's where I come in. And I came into the Bureau of Consular Affairs about 8 years ago to help them redesign their assignments process from soup to nuts, every part of it, because it used to be someone would pick up a phone call and say, hey, I want to come to Brussels. And someone would say, great, you can do that. And that's not really a great way to make assignments or to really build great teams. It's not good for the department as a whole because you're not getting the right people in the right places at the right time. So we redesigned the way that it works. And so today is really the first big week of the assignment cycle. We've been preparing since May, but now we have about 430 bidders who are coming in, and they're bidding on less than 400 jobs. So it's very, very competitive at all the different grades. And so you can think of grades as just, the very senior people to the very sort of bid managers to the very entry-level people. And they have jobs at all those different levels. And so it's very, very competitive. And so I am currently managing about 430 or so 360 evaluations. We read every one of them. Our bidders actually get a copy of them back. They're anonymized, but they are feedback from their peers and their supervisors and their subordinates. These are also subordinates and who are locally employed staff. So we have language issues and language barriers and cultural gaps. And so we take all of that into account. It's a very complicated process. And in another few weeks, we will literally start to take a look at the world of all of the positions that we have around the planet, and we will start penciling people in. And eventually we will probably fill about 330 jobs by the end of October. And we will do what we call giving handshakes. And that on October 31st, or I think the 31st, we will send out hundreds of job offers, basically all at the same time. The entire Department of State is actually going through this process right now. And there are people like me all through the department who help all the other bureaus do this kind of work. It's exhausting. The days are very long, and it's why you pay us. The sort of May through the mid-November, it's crazy. And really the rest of the year, I have other special work that I do for them, but this is the time. This is why we get paid. And it's long hours, it's extraordinary work, it's consequential. And I love government. I love working with the government because I feel like it's just really exciting, and it's tiring, and it's really meaningful work, which is different than some of the work I've done in corporate in years past, where I didn't like getting yelled at by CEOs and board members and getting thrown out of rooms and feeling like I was not doing anything for anybody. And so the moment I got into contracting, I was like, what is this? And I never left. And it's really, really wonderful. So I came to kind of talk to all of you about that tonight.
Yeah, when you say it's consequential and weighty, I mean, yeah, you are placing humans where there could be huge political
Right.
outcomes. You don't know where there will end up being unrest.
It's a very dangerous career. It is, it's what they do is incredible. I'm not good enough to do that kind of work. They live and work in extraordinary circumstances. Some of them can't even leave their compounds. If you are working, for instance, in an embassy in Kabul, you are in a compound and you cannot leave. Your apartment has bulletproof glass, and there are bombs literally dropping around your head all the time. You're wearing, flak jackets and body armor literally to walk across the compound to go to work. And they come back, and you can see the strain and stress on them. And if you have a family, if you have a spouse that you're traveling with, if you have children, if you have medical issues, what they do is extraordinary. And that somehow someone like me gets to help shape the arc of their career is just, it's obscene. I don't know why anybody lets me do it. And yet they allow this, and it's a wonderful thing to be a part of. And I normally in contracting, you can jump around. If you spend 2 years somewhere and you're like, oh, I'm kind of done, I want to go and get some other kind of experience, you can do that. But I've been with them for 8 years. I just recently signed another 5-year contract, and I'm going to stay for all 5 years. I was really contemplating what I was going to do. And when I started looking around at the universe of other work, I thought I would be much better off staying with them, because the work's amazing. It's really incredible. So
It sounds like you're in the right place.
yeah, it's fabulous. It's a great place. And I've done this kind of work for, I started doing government contracting in the very early 90s, when around here in Washington, most of contracting was really about the military. There was not a whole lot of contracting going on for civilian agencies. So, the sort of non-military agencies. And as technology started to really explode, you started to see all these notions of reinventing government with advanced technologies. And yet you had to have people like us come in and figure out how to blend people, process, and technology. And we did that all across the government. We've been doing it for years. And there's just tremendous work that you can do. It doesn't end. It's really incredible. And it's, once you have a security clearance, which we'll talk a little bit about, this work is fantastic, whether you're an OD or IO or organizational behavior, any related field. And you can do this. And the best part, and why I'm talking to people about this now, is because there's a lot of hybrid opportunities that weren't available pre-COVID. And so you're seeing a lot of big contractors, even a lot of the really big consultancies like Booz Allen, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Accenture, all of the really big players, they're offering hybrid opportunities to come and do this kind of work. I've never seen that before. So this is a great time for people who want to get into something kind of cool or different.
Yeah.
And have it,
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
Let's say there's somebody listening to this that has done contracting in the private sector, but they haven't done it in the government world. And like cognitively, we know there've got to be some major differences, but you've done both.
Yeah.
What are, like, I don't know, maybe 2 key differences of working in those 2 spaces?
The stakeholders are really different. And it's with an agency, your stakeholders can be the White House. Your stakeholders can be the Supreme Court. Your stakeholders can be Congress. And so the pressures are very different. There's a lot of change that happens potentially every 2 or 4 years because you have new administrations coming in with new priorities. You work for your agency. Your agency works to support, that every agency has a mission, whatever it is. So think about even something like Social Security, right? They have a very big mission. But yet their mission sort of stays the same, right? But in my case, for working with the State Department, or I work for Customs and Border Protection, when you have a change in administrations, you have a change in priorities. And so you will find that the agency at that moment needs to do an awful lot of adapting. They need to be, and bureaucracies aren't good at that. And so the work that we get to do, we can help them be prepared for things like that. We can help change them into more of a proactive stance than a reactive stance. And there's a lot of work in that. So that's a big difference. The other big difference is sometimes you don't really know all the time if what you're doing is having a direct impact on anybody, because you can be a very small cog in a very large machine. And so you have to be willing to accept that sometimes you may never know if what you're doing helps. And it could also be many years before what you do helps. So after 9/11, I spent about 5 years traveling around the country with a team of people working with a federal program that was teaching state and local responder organizations how to implement new technologies that would help to share information during emergencies, either man-made or natural. Because one of the big issues during 9/11 is when the towers went down in New York, all of the communications went dark. And people were, I don't know if anyone knows this, but a lot of the responders were handing out handwritten notes to each other as to what they needed to do because there were no radios. And the problem was, you had a lot of radio vendors, the old walkie-talkie kind of radios. They don't talk to each other. If you buy a Samsung on one end and you buy an RCA on the other, they don't talk to each other. And so part of our work was working with the private sector to create interoperable communications. But a lot of the work that I did with my team was retraining, helping to do tabletop exercises to teach people how to collaborate with each other and to create organizations that were less siloed. And you never knew if what you were doing was any good at all. And it turns out that 20 years later, I get to see that it actually did make a difference. But it took 20 years because now I can see what's happened on the technology side because I have friends who still do that work. And so when you watch your TV and you watch cable and you see one of those emergency Amber Alerts or emergency flood alerts, that's one of my colleagues from back in the day. That's his system. He built that. And so I can see all the little tags that he's put on the bottom because I know what he did. And I can see all of his little footprints all along those emergency messages because he did that work. And I got to do that with him. It takes a long time sometimes. So that's, there's a lot of differences, but those are two of the big ones is you don't always know, but you have to know that somehow you're impacting potentially millions of citizens across the country, if not around the planet.
Wow, that's incredible.
That's incredible work. You can do amazing things. It's not all like that. I'm not going to lie. I mean, some of it's pretty mundane, but it's a choose your own adventure. So if you get into something you're like, well, this kind of sucks, you can leave. You can go somewhere else. So there are a couple of questions.
Yes, Rich asks, what's the minimum typical clearance that's required to work with you at the State Department?
So you get a clearance for the job that you need. And so it's actually not what the minimum is, it's what's required for the work. So for instance, I had a top secret prior to my current job, but because my current work only requires a secret, you get adjudicated down to a secret. If I needed a top secret to do something else, I would have to go through the process and fill out extra work and then have to go through, the extra process to get re-adjudicated at a top secret. It just depends. A lot of work, typically, you really don't need much more than a secret clearance. You need to get sponsored for that. And we can talk a little bit about how to actually do that. It's not like walking into a DMV and just saying, hey, I want a clearance. You have to get sponsored by a company who hires you for a project where you can get hired without a clearance. You will get an interim clearance that you need. It takes a few weeks. You fill out some paperwork. And then you go through this horrendous process, which can take a year or more, but you can still work and get paid, at the same time. It just depends on the job. Some companies, for work where clearances require, for instance, top secret or higher, most companies don't want to bring you in and start that process, because there's plenty of people who can do that work that have top secret clearances, or even things that are higher, whether they're compartmented clearances, which are a whole different animal. But for me, typically around here, a lot of work you can do with secret or what's called a public trust. And a public trust is just sort of a very advanced background check. It still takes 6 months, but those are the two big ones that you'll mostly see. It's very unusual that you would need something more than that. And if you were working at a job and your client said, hey, you need a top secret now, you would just go through the process of making that happen. If anyone's interested, there's a form out on the internet. It's called the SF86. It is about 136 pages. It is the form that it's the security clearance paperwork form that shows you all of the stuff you need to collect that will then go into the electronic system of record, where investigators will kind of pick that up, and you'll have numbers and they'll show you all that stuff. Oh yeah, well, there you go. So you hold the secret clearance. So that's how that really works. Yeah. You get a clearance for the job you need. So there's another question here too.
Yeah. If someone is looking to transition to government work, how different is it working for a consulting firm that contracts with the government compared to entering into the GS system?
It's hard to get a government job these days. It's also hard for people like us to get hired by the government as anything other than contractors, because we're specialists. We come in with a purpose, and we're not necessarily going to get hired as full-time civil service. So it is different. You can work for a large consultancy, and there's actually also two different distinctions that I need to make. You can come in as a government consultant. That is where you might get hired, say, by a PricewaterhouseCoopers or a large consultancy that has a lot of contracts with the government, but you really more work for the firm. You might be a senior associate or a manager or a director, and you're still managing staff. You're still writing proposals and dealing with budgets and all that stuff, but you're also managing projects. So your career path is more about working for the firm and yet supporting clients, and also bringing up the next sort of, the next generation of consultants who are coming up under you. That's more of the consulting path. And that's the very standard kind of career path that you would have in a firm. As a contractor, you are, generally speaking, 9 to 5. You have been hired by a contractor. You're a body, right? You have a salary, you get benefits, but you are most likely going to be at a desk at an agency, and that's what you're doing. You're not doing anything else. So you're more of staff augmentation versus a consultant. So you are doing the work of a specialist. And so I am at the State Department, I am a contractor. My companies who just and someone has to hold my security clearance, because I cannot hold that myself. So my contractor holds my clearance. They bill the department pays them, and then I get a paycheck through the contractor. They give me benefits, they take good care of me. And then after a few years, because there's a lot of different types of contracts out there. This is a small business contract, which means that the vendor can't hold it for more than 5 years. And eventually the department rebids it, someone else wins it, but I stay at my desk. They say, hey, you're getting a new contractor, tell us what you want, raise, kind of those kinds of things. And then I just get a new contractor, I fill out new paperwork, but I go right back to my same job the next day. So there's a lot of different paths. But you can try to get hired as a civil servant, but it's very, very difficult these days. You're much better off getting involved in either consulting or as a contractor, and it just gives you a lot more flexibility. I'm not sure that answered your question, Jenny. Did you have more than that?
She had a couple more questions, but I think you kind of spoke to those. Jenny,
Yeah.
if he didn't answer your questions in full, will you answer them again? I think, Dan, maybe one thing that you could touch on more is, how would you decide based on like skill set, which one might be the best fit?
So it really more depends on the preference of what you want. So for me, I didn't like the consulting side of contracting, because I didn't like working for I didn't want to work for a consulting firm and be beholden to having a manager, having a director, having a partner, and having potentially a lot of different clients, having to manage staff. I didn't want any of that. You have to move up in a consulting firm at some point. You really can't stay a practitioner. They don't really allow that. I mean, some will tell you they do, but they really don't. At least, and I don't, maybe someone can back me up on that. I worked for some very, very large consultancies, and none of them really truly had just a practitioner path where I could stay there. Contracting offers me that ability to just be a practitioner. I am not beholden to a partner. I'm not beholden to a senior manager. I don't have to do business development. I'm not managing anyone. And I get to do the work that I really love doing. And I get to do it all day, all the time. And it's your preference. It's really dependent on your career path. I have avoided management like the plague, sorry. But I have avoided it at all costs. And contracting lets me do that. Being just a contractor lets me sit at a desk in an agency and just do the work that they hired me for. And I really love it. Government contractors, you can find them all over LinkedIn. And if you look, even if you look for jobs here in Washington, for instance, if you go to LinkedIn and you go to the jobs and you look for jobs in zip codes that are near Washington, like 22207, and then you look for companies like Booz Allen, you look for the big top 100. I'm actually going to send Britni some resources afterwards. There's a lot of links and places where you can learn about the large contractors that are around here, but it's really, really easy. You can go to Google and type in, government contracting jobs, and they will pop up. So can I share my screen, Britni, for a minute? Will everybody see
Yes.
this?
And
I'm going to,
Dan, anything you share with me, I will send out with the email to everyone that
okay,
signed up for this, so that
right.
they have all of that as well. So you should
So
be able to share your screen. Yeah.
So I'm going to answer both. There's a couple of questions here. One is, where do you find government contractors to work for? And the second is, what are the first steps? So I'm going to answer both of those at the same time. You can see this is my LinkedIn profile. And I just brought up a couple of jobs that are local to here. We have hundreds and hundreds and thousands of contractors around the country, and some of them are international. It's very easy to find out who they are. Britni, I will send you a pretty ugly cut and paste Word document of at least the more recent top 100 government contractors, and that is by revenue. And you can go look at all their websites. You can go connect with them over LinkedIn. You can find online job recruiting fairs from them. I mean, the work's amazing. But there's really a couple of things you need to know. And I deliberately brought up two jobs from two different companies. One is Khaki. They're one of the biggest badass contractors in Washington. And I brought up another from a really large consultancy that you should all know, Booz Allen Hamilton. Booz Allen's global headquarters is right here in McLean, Virginia, in Tyson's Corner. It's this incredible campus. And if you ever want to work for Booz Allen, this is the place to do it. So let me bring up the first one. This work is amazing. Like these types of jobs are all over Washington. There's so many of them. This one, unfortunately, I think this is the one that I brought up where you cannot compete for. And the way you know that is when you see something that says you will bring these qualifications or must have or required, you'll see right here, active secret security clearance. So if you see a posting for a contract position that's really interesting and it says you must have a clearance, you can't compete for it. Don't even bother. When you look at a posting, again, it's the same, really, and these are the same jobs. They're just with different companies. I wanted to also go back here because I wanted to show you who you get to do this work for. This particular job is working for the Naval Sustainment Systems Shipyards Transformation Office. This work is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's crazy work for OD people. This is like this is like one of those dreams this is like an absolute dream, because it's every dysfunctional organization all put into one, and you get to go and try and help them out. It's great. It's absolutely fantastic. I've done work with the Navy. They're brilliant. It's brilliant work. But this job you can't compete for, but there's probably a lot of others that you can. And here's one of them. So you'll also find that most of the large corporations, the really large companies, they'll have two different sides to their business. They'll have the private sector and they'll have a government public sector practice. The public sector practices are what you're interested in. And they are cordoned off and they're very separate, because also doing this for the government, you have different accounting systems, different HR systems, different pay systems, different benefit systems. It's very, very, very different. So if you're looking at a Booz Allen and you look at a job like this, it is most likely with their public sector side. And so that is really the difference. You are completely cordoned off from the other side of the business. But what I wanted to show you here is when it says you have the ability to obtain a security clearance, you can compete for this job, because you don't have to have one. It just means you have to be able to get one. And what that means is this company will hire you if you have the right skills. They will get you an interim clearance and they will sponsor you for a secret clearance, and you will just go through the paperwork. They can take a year or so, sometimes less. And once you are adjudicated with a clearance, you're good to go. So what I tell people is getting a clearance is like money in the bank. It's how you get employed in contracting. It's also how you stay employed. There are a lot of tips and guidelines on the internet about how to get a clearance. I'll send you some of the better ones, Britni, so that you can share with people. It's a lot. And people don't realize that it's not as hard to get as they think. They were like, someone goes, oh, I smoked pot in college. No one cares. No one cares. There are bigger considerations for getting clearance. Usually they're financial or having various overseas interests. But for the most part, I've only met one or two people in all these years that haven't been able to get a clearance. And they were for just really ridiculous reasons. So for the most part, everybody should be able to get, at least a public trust, if not a secret. After that, it does get tricky for other reasons, but you can compete for this kind of job. And I mean, look at the work you get to do here. I mean, it's just amazing. This one is a little more generic. I don't know really what this work is, but this would be a senior associate type of position. So maybe you've worked as a first year associate in a firm, and this is sort of your second or third year. Maybe you've done some organizational analysis, and you've done some studies, and you've done some process mapping and a little bit of this and that, and you just got promoted to a senior associate. I'm guessing this is a type of job that you might be looking at. So it's still pretty basic, but there's a lot of great work out here. And so that's really what you want to look for, is where you see something that says you can obtain a clearance, not a clearance is required for this job. That's the secret code. That's kind of how you that's how you crack the code here. And you can see there's just tons and tons and tons of these. I brought up Booz Allen, and a lot of these they're all hybrid. You can see now, they will tell you now that they're hybrid, which is really, really wonderful. Hybrid, it's amazing. Hybrid, it's extraordinary. I've never seen this before, ever. I've never seen this before. And the industry is really reeling from a shortage of talented people. And so the flexibilities that are being offered now to get hired and for the type of work you can do and where you can do it from, it's never been seen before. So it's a great time.
Dan, when I think about these big orgs, I think, oh, there's no way they could be agile or pivot that quickly. But they're offering hybrid positions, and there are plenty of smaller orgs that still aren't doing that. Do you think the pressure of such the need for us has kind of spurred that? Or are these organizations maybe more agile than I've been thinking?
The industry it's right now, it's going through a lot of issues through COVID, like a lot of other industries. So government contracting is an industry. It is last year was an almost $800+ billion industry, plus other, money. But we were losing a lot of talent in the same way other industries were, because people were just quitting. They were just leaving. They were like, I don't have to do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired of the daily grind. And it was impacting contractors at all levels. And it was, to some extent, impacting the very large contractors. I was at a conference last October, and one of the executives from, it was a very large contractor. I had never seen anything like this before. He's on a panel discussion, and we're talking, literally, this is what the entire panel is talking about. And he puts his hands over his head And he says, I'm going to lose 30% of my staff to attrition because of this. And he said, I don't know what we're going to do. I do not know how we're going to survive. And we are going to have to create policies that we have never done before. We're going to have to make ourselves attractive in ways we've never done before because we didn't have to. And it was incredibly honest because in past years, they didn't have to. It was very, they didn't have to worry about stuff like that. And now they really do. It's also dependent on the agency that you work for as a contractor. Some agencies are now requiring that their contract staff live within at least some radius of the building so that they can come in if needed. It just really, it's ever changing around here. Like for me, I don't have to go into my office. I go in when I want to, I go in when I need to, and no one questions that, right? Because we get our work done. So it's not even just agency to agency. It can be office to office, floor to floor, team to team. It just depends on a lot of different things. But getting hired by these big contractors, they know that they are fighting another war for talent. And so they're offering things that they've never would have offered before. Yes, that's the answer. It's really extraordinary what's going on.
Yeah.
And we can't compete with private industry the way, because of things like security clearances. When you think of like cyber security professionals, we can't compete. The industry loses people because when they see a job that they want, it might not pay as much, but the roadblock can be the security clearance. So even that is being talked about as how do we deal with that now? So there's a lot of changes coming, even more than what's happening now.
Like the checks in the security clearance or the like sluggishness of the process?
Not even having one.
Okay.
So if you're a cybersecurity professional, you really do, it's very hard for you. You need a clearance because of the work you may be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard for the government to do that. They're even talking about reskilling former military to come in and be cybersecurity experts because they already have their clearance. They know the work, they know the environment. And so that's been kind of bandied about, but it's hard. But on the OD side, if you walk into my office and I would introduce you to my executive director, and I told him what you did, he would be like, and you need to get hired right now because they just don't have enough. We have an entire team from, I think currently Grant Thornton on our 12th floor. It is an entire team of organizational development specialists who support these extraordinary initiatives all across the Bureau. We've got maybe 15 or 20 of them up there, all time, full time. They are literally dedicated to us and only us all the time, full time. Analysis, surveys, change programs, DEI&A, you name it. And they're amazing. Like, cause I worked for Grant Thornton. So these are some people I used to know from back in the day, but we've got a whole team full of them. And every agency has teams just like this across, multiple offices and multiple organizations, and they still can't get enough of them.
Would you say the odds are better of you getting in if you are fresh out of college and very teachable to get into these positions? Or do you advise that somebody goes and gets specific types of experience first and then applies if they want to get into government contracting?
That's a tricky.
You're
So
welcome.
age discrimination is very real.
Okay.
It's very, very real. It's very, very front and center. It's really front and center in a lot of large consultancies. I'm just going to say it. I mean, I started feeling it. I'm 54 today, by the way. I'm 54 is my
Happy
54
birthday.
today. Thank you. And I started feeling age discrimination in some of the large consulting firms that I worked at when I was about 40 or 41. I started really feeling it.
Whoa.
Whoa is right. Because I started feeling it from the younger staff. I did it too. Hey, listen, I'm guilty. I did it when I first moved in. I'm like, get out of my way, you old, get out of my way. But it's real. That also depends, right? So right now, I think you probably have a good shot. I mean, no one wants to really come in as an associate. That's really a job for someone right out of college.
Okay.
It's not even a job for someone coming out with a master's degree because you're going to not love doing that work. But if you have experience, There are a lot of companies who are looking for people who look like us at a certain point. I can tell you that at least in my building, age and experience absolutely matters. It's one of the and that's why I stay with them, because it's very nice to, your age and experience really matters.
Mhm.
They will bring me into meetings where they know that another bureau has brought in their OD person or whatever, and they look like and they come potentially maybe right out of, undergrad, or even just come out of, master's program, and they don't have a lot of experience. And everybody waits until they're all done, and then they ask me what I think. And I try to be very careful. Hi, I've got someone's waving. Leslie,
I have
hi.
a question.
Okay,
Yeah, Leslie.
come on through.
Um, you talk about age discrimination, so I definitely fall into that category. But I don't think that I would want to work for Booz Allen or a big organization like that. I'd prefer to have a smaller organization. That said, I'm an academic, and when I have applied previously, and it's not like I don't have experience, but they look at my experience that I've had over the past 5-7 years has been just being an academic.
Right.
And then they don't think that I can do the work, but I can do the work.
Right.
But
So in contracting, there's a place for you. And there are a lot of great small, so academics in contracting are a big deal, because I am too, right? I came to academia kind of backwards. I started as a practitioner and worked my way through the different levels. But there are a lot of PhDs in contracting, and they depend on us for lots of different things. And you can get hired as, there are PhD IOs all over the State Department. They're everywhere. There's a bunch of them because I know them. And they came in as pure academics, and they either came in through small contractors or they came in with their own consulting firms. So you can do that. There are opportunities for you to come in. You shouldn't feel like you wouldn't, I don't blame you. You wouldn't want to come in with the Booz Allen, but there is work here for people like you. There really is. And it's good work, because
how do I find that? How do I find somebody who's open to it?
It takes a while. You have to really do it. It's honing your search. You're welcome to connect with me, and we can we can talk more about it, because
Okay.
I'd like to find out more about your background, and then if I maybe just through chatting something, we'll go ping, and I may know someone.
Okay, fab.
Because it is a very small community. So so I'm happy to chat. So reach out to me at some point and we'll chat.
Will do. Thank you.
Yeah, that'd be great. And Lisa, Dr. Thomas, you can do the same thing. Please reach out to me, and we'll set up time and chat. And if there's something we can figure out, let's do that. So.
Okay. I shared your LinkedIn again in the chat as well, so people can connect to you there.
Yeah, I posted it up on top. So.
Yeah, we've had a few people in and out, so they wouldn't be able to see that. So
Yeah.
I want to make sure that everybody could see that.
One of the things that people really like in a PhD is that we do bring that academic rigor, and we do bring a defendability to the work. And in particularly in government agencies, it is not. So I've had people walk up to my desk. The first time this happened, I thought, you are out of your mind. They said, we need to do a programmatic review. We need 5 or 6 surveys designed. We have a few, they're really bad, and we know they're really bad. And this is a request from the White House. And I swallowed very hard. And I said, fine, I'll do it. Because they didn't walk up to anyone else. They walked up to me and said, you need to do this, and we're going to put, your name's going to be on this. And the pressure though, and so that's the other difference. Sometimes the pressure is, it's a lot. It can be really tough. And when things go bad, it's on you. And when things go good, your client gets the credit, right? Just like anything else. But the pressure is extraordinary, because when someone says the White House asks for X, and policy decisions are going to be made on that, or even executive orders are going to be made on that, or laws or rules or wow, I mean, you got to be kidding. So that is where they depend on having someone like us with experience, but also that we can do that kind of work because they know that no one else can do it that way. And then
And
they
I
have someone to
try
stand
to
behind.
tell my students, you have to know theory because you just
Right.
can't wing it on opinion or
Can't wing it.
even your own experience. You have to know.
Right. I blend both.
I feel validated.
You are validated. I have to bring my experience to the table, but I bring the methodology. I have this conversation
Yeah.
all the time. I had it last week with someone where I'm like, because someone literally walked up to me and shared a survey with me. My executive director gave me a survey that someone gave him, and he walked right to me and said, "What do you think of this?" And a half hour later, I said, "Who did this?" They said it's already got a problem just from the way they even asked the demographic questions. And he said, "Yeah, I know, but I needed you to hear that. I needed you to tell me that." Right. And then this way he can go and he can say, "Hey, absolutely not. And here's why." Right. And I said, everything else after it, I can't even look at because it's already all wrong. Right. And there was so many problems just with the methodology and the approach that everything they would have gotten back was garbage. And that's where they need people like us. So there's work for us out there. Go work for the National Science Foundation. All right.
Okay, so I have a couple questions, but I want to make sure if you have questions, raise your hand through the emoji or pop them in chat. Otherwise, I will keep asking questions that kind of came in through the emails. So Dan, I assume one of the differences between private and government work is that it's possible in government work, you're working with quite a bit of churn, especially with people that have been voted in. They come in, you're there at the desk, they leave, you're still there at the desk, the next group comes in.
Right.
What's that like relationship wise, managing that relationship? Because you have to work well with them right away, essentially, so that there isn't a lag. You're working on projects that arch over multiple changes.
So this is a big problem because contractors act in many cases as continuity. Whether for the military or like in my case for the department, your civil service, where you have people coming in. So think about the Department of State. Like my foreign service officers rotate in every summer and they rotate out every summer. So my entire team of foreign service officers literally rotated out a month ago, and a whole new crop has rotated in the middle of the worst possible part of our work. And the old ones going out will do everything they can to be there as long as they can before they go overseas. Some of them stay here, thank God. And so it's my job, you're right, to very quickly teach them what they need to know about what we do for them. They need to learn their job as well, and they get that kind of training. But you have to very quickly build instant rapport with them. And you just learn how to do that over time, right? The first time it happens, it can be kind of tricky. You're like, "Oh, I loved you and you're leaving me. And now they have new people coming in and I don't like you as much." And you just have to deal with it. You have to learn how to do it. And you know that in theory, they're gone in a year or two. And you sometimes do have to keep the peace because they're going to leave and you're going to stay and you're going to get a new crop of people in. It just really depends. I'm spoiled because we do all of the hiring. And so, of course, since we're the staffing team, we can bring in anybody we want. So we always bring in the best people. We can be very picky, and we have to be. So I'm very lucky. The officers that I get to work with are absolutely the cream of the crop. I mean, they're the top 1%. But it's not like that in other agencies where people rotate in and out. So Britni, what you're talking about though are political appointees in theory, or you're maybe talking about agency heads. Those are really different. It's kind of, those are people that's just a part of the game. At my level, that really doesn't have much impact on me, except on rare occasions it does. And really what that means is that those political appointees they work at the pleasure of the president or the administration. So their job is to implement the policy of the administration. And if the policy doesn't match what we do, then we have to change what we do, right? And so that's just, again, that's part of the notion of, we have to then figure out how to make all that work. And so again, that's where people like us come in, because that's our job. We go help them to do that in many cases. but that's kind of a different thing. But for me, yes, my people rotate in and out all the time. I have a lot of friends who work in a military environment, and again, they rotate in and out. So as a contractor, they're continuity. So it's their job to know their stuff. It's their job to build relationships when new people come in, and it's their job to teach them and to get them going as fast as possible. I know contractors who've been with the State Department for 30 years, and that's their job. It's great. It's very stressful though. I will say having people rotate in and out is very, very stressful because you just don't know what you're going to get sometimes. And they may want to make their own changes, and you have to basically say, we've tried that and we can try it again, but here's what happened the first time, and we don't really have time for that. Or we're right in the middle of what we are doing now. We can't change it, but let's talk about it in a month when we're done with this piece of work. So it's a lot like negotiating. This is where having a PhD, pretending. So this is like negotiating with your committee.
Okay.
Oh, State Department wife. Hi, who are you? Oh, hi.
Amy says, I'm a State Department wife and have moved abroad a couple times with our kids. I found support systems and employee wellness abroad to be lacking. When I look over the organizational map, I can't seem to find a department that is essentially a family readiness department. From what you're saying, that's because most IO positions are outsourced.
Right.
After our experience, I would just love to be able to have discussions and or work to be a part of the growth and change. How do I find this department and connect with them?
Oh, so Amy, can I ask you a little bit more about what? So you're a spouse. Which bureau is your spouse with? Can you tell me that? No, are they consular? Are they like where? What cone? Like where to?
Yeah. So we've done England and Germany, which are like easy. But we have two special needs kiddos. So we kind of had to be able to stay in positions that allowed us to have access to things
Right.
for them. But even with that, we had a lot of struggles. I just would love, I've been researching, I would love to be able to connect and just share our experience or eventually work in that department after, living through it, and be a part of that. But I cannot find it.
It's hard. It's really not so much a department as it is. I just have a very unique position, but the group that I talked about is they're part of a part of Grant Thornton, and they're upstairs on the 12th floor of our building. But there's just a lot of other type of work that gets done. I'll tell you this: the department is 80,000 people, and all the different bureaus. So I don't know which bureau you're sort of in, where your spouse is in right now. I don't know if you told me that. But I don't get involved in any of that. I mean, I know that there are a lot of programs, but I don't know much about them. I mean, that is not my work. I mean, really, my work is just is assignments, and so you're probably more familiar with that in terms of the bidding every year or 2 years or 3 years. That's what I do. So I'm the one who basically helps your spouse to build their lobbying package. And since I'm not an assignments officer, my job is just to help all of the bidders get together all of the pieces of the puzzle that they need. And then my assignments officers are the ones who ultimately do the assignments. But, I don't know much about med. There are probably lots of things like that within the department, but to be honest, because since I'm not one of you all in that same way, I don't really know where they are, and I don't focus on them. I just know that, the Med Bureau has a lot of different things. I know there are different types of family programs, but I don't know what they are, to be quite honest. They are there, but I really don't know. How long have you all been with the department? Relatively new? Well, at least 10 years.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Like, I think we started in when was my son born? So it's been about 10 years.
About 10 years, right? Because you would have had 2 directed tours, and now it's probably time for your spouse to start bidding on their own, right?
Yeah, we're staying in the area though. I want my own career, and that's a hard part, for wives not wives in general, but any of the spouses that are just traveling and following. It's hard to have your own career along with that. So we're going to stay in DC for a bit, but it's an intense process. Like hearing you talk about it and prepping and all of that. It's a lot. It's a lot for everyone.
Well, reach out to me. I mean, I'm still happy to chat. I don't really know a lot, but maybe there are people I can connect you with.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's been like a lingering question I haven't been able to like pin down. So even just knowing that's why, it's because it's contracted out.
Right. A lot of what we do is all
helpful.
contracted. Yeah, the department doesn't need to hire. So, and we have to be, so the other thing too about contracting or consulting for the government, in a lot of these cases, and I'm really glad you actually said that, we need to be independent third parties. We really can't have skin in the game. We have to be that wall. Like we put up
Yeah.
a pretty big wall between, I put up a really big wall between myself and almost everybody else. I do let it down now, but there are times where I cannot do that. I have to be that third party because I have to be seen as very neutral in everything I do. I treat every single person the exact same way. It may not look like it sometimes. I may joke around with them, but I do not give preferential treatment because that would be a very bad thing. And so that is why a lot of that, from the consulting perspective, from the OD side of life, we're really independent third parties, especially if we're doing an organizational analysis or making big change recommendations, because we can't have a stake in it. It's not, it's really bad to do that. It just wouldn't
Yeah, I
work.
can appreciate that.
Right. So the government doesn't, they know that, and it's very important. They need to, say we brought in a PwC, we brought in a Booz Allen to do this work, because then they also then may have to give that to either Congress as a report, or they may have to respond to a GAO report or an audit, and they may have to say, we brought in, external experts, and this is what they told us to do. And that's where the work gets really, really interesting sometimes. So Jenny, you have your hand up, I think.
Yeah, I kind of to piggyback off of Amy's question about with being a military or being a spouse. I'm a military spouse, and we have about 6-7 years left. And so is this something that what I'm looking at or trying to decide on is if it's something that's going to really compete with our commitment opportunities. We also have a lot of children. So that's kind of that's a big commitment. And it's a big ask my family to put all of that energy towards the career for me. And is it something that, time constraint? Is it something that, because I see that there's other ones that are hybrid type positions. So that may be something that's possible, or if it's something that I need to wait until my spouse retires so that I can really go full force at it.
I don't know that I have an answer. Well, I'm going to start with your spouse first, and I'm real sorry to do that. But when you retire from the military, you go right back into contracting, and you make 2 to 3 times your salary doing the same work you were doing, but you do it here stateside. So that's the first thing. I'm sure your spouse already knows that. Most of my time with military contracting is usually involves, and the contractors, staff, that they're all former retired military that retired one day and came right back to that job the next day as a contractor, making 3 times their salary they were the day before. So I'll just tell you that. That's the first thing. But there are a lot of programs and contractors here in Washington who love military families. And there is work, but that is not my specialty. I really mostly focused on the civilian side of life. But I do know people, you should, but please do reach out, because I do know people who have started their own contracting firms, or retired military, with them retired Marines or Army. And if you had a question, I'd be happy to ask them and see if they know of resources that might be good for you. I don't know the answer to that, but there's a very prized thing that happens when you come out of the military, particularly in contracting. There's a lot of love for all of you who come out, and there is work, and there's flexibilities that are offered, but they're different. And I'm not fully versed in all of them, because contracting is really it's broken up into DoD and non-DoD work. And I have mostly spent the bulk of my time on the civilian side. The other side is very complicated, but I do have friends who are in it, and I'm happy to ask them.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to do that. And they will have better answers than I do.
Okay, we have one question in chat, and then I am actually gonna share a survey, which I hope is the right link, because I shared a couple of the wrong links earlier. But I'm going to keep doing these Ask Anythings throughout next year. And I would like to know, what kind of people do you want to hear from? Do you want Dan back? Do you want other, types of government contracting or other consultants in? I would love to hear from you. The survey also covers other programming I do, some of which you may have heard of and been involved with, some of which maybe you haven't, but I'd love to hear from you. So Dr. Ashworth said, going back to the spouse readiness, he said, could it be helpful if a spouse run family readiness program was stood up? And that's kind of what the Army already does.
Right. And State Department, they do have, I'm fairly certain that there are programs that are out there that are run to some extent by, there have to be something like this, but I really wish I could, I don't know, but I imagine there has to be something like it. I just don't know what it would be, but I think my staffing people would know. Some of them might know, so I could probably ask and get you in the right direction. But off the top of my head, I just don't know, because the department's so big and I'm in such a small part of it.
And it sounds like Amy replied and said there are some support systems in place. It's
Yeah,
not enough. And it's probably all volunteer people that are doing other things too. So it makes sense, Amy, that you're looking for something that is more formally in
so
the
Amy,
process.
you would be what would be called an eligible family member, EFM. And there are opportunities for EFMs, but usually they are within embassies overseas, if that country allows you to work, or if there are jobs within the embassy. I don't think some of them are great. I don't think some of them are bad. And I think there's probably some EFM work that does get done in the States, but I don't know. I'm not really sure about that.
Yeah, you often have to then transfer to like a full position, and it is
Full
easier
position,
to do that if you've held an EFM position overseas. But yeah,
Cool.
no, it's a very interesting, complex situation in that there are some programs, they're just very disjointed. There's not a lot that's very comprehensive, and there's no one that can help like walk you through. There's not like a case manager or anything if you start running into walls. So quite often it's just other State Department people who have kind of been through that experience, and we all have different experiences of hitting all sorts of different walls. And so it's just very, it's interesting. It's like we need some social workers posted abroad, but that doesn't exist yet.
These are really the bigger issues that sort of big HR has to deal with.
Yes.
Yeah, and unfortunately, but like I said, I'm happy to chat, and if someone knows something I don't, then I'm sure that, because we have a lot of resources for bidders coming in, but I don't know what we do beyond that for
Yeah,
family.
thank you.
But I'll try and find out for you.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I want to thank everyone for being here. Thank you for participating so well, bringing great questions. I learned a lot. Dan, thanks for giving us your time. It means a lot that you were present and that you put so much thought into this.
Oh, it's a real joy to be with all of you. I'll happily chat with anyone who wants to reach out, and we'll see what we can do.
All right.
Britni, thank you for inviting me. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.